Hey everybody, I am at a Panera right now, and I thought this would be a good time to kind of discuss and talk about um, social intelligence. Specifically, I wanted to give a few quick examples of uh, bizarre moments where uh, social intelligence definitely would have been helpful in some of my previous jobs I've had. Um, or just encounters. Now, if you know anything about my blog, over the last few years, have really been getting into improving social skills and emotional intelligence because I think they're very useful for any area of life. Now, what I wanted to discuss today was basically a few stories, mostly from my time working in food and dining, where you really start to encounter these somewhat bizarre situations where you realize that, oh wow, this was poorly communicated, or wow, some people are not really good at it, and if I'm also not good at it, then you lead to just very uh, crappy situations. So sometimes when you get jobs like this, you just learn quickly. So let's get to the first story. Um, so in the first story, it's working in food and dining, and when it gets fast paced, it's fast paced, which means um, as the waiter I was working as, um, oftentimes you're handling more customers than you usually can, and they want different orders. They want their orders placed a certain way. They want you to bring something back or bring some extra condiments. It can be a stressful job, and I ran into cases where basically the customers wanted something complex. They ordered something, then they wanted it changed. It wasn't my fault. It was just like they wanted something changed, and the story behind why a certain dish was changed can be somewhat convoluted. Maybe they wanted this thing and then they added this thing, but then you know you sometimes have to go through a few lines of communication. There's the head chef and then other chefs behind them, and then things can get lost in translation and so forth. And I ran into an instance where I just needed something from another of my coworkers. It was something like I needed them to send something in a certain way, otherwise the head chef refused to make it. Um, Also, a bit ridiculous, but maybe he had to do with formality, or sometimes with a lot of these people, they're working menial jobs, not making much money. So as you would imagine, sometimes they just don't want to do something a certain way, and it's not logical, it's not polite, but you get a lot of impolite people there. So I brought it up to this coworker, and she's like, "Why?" Now, when the situation is flipped, I would have never done that. I know I wouldn't have, but you run in these cases where you might be respectful, or you might want a certain thing, um, and you would do certain things in a very quick, prompt way. But then, when when the roles are reversed, they wouldn't do the same. And so, rather than just putting it in, they asked me like, "Well, why do you want this a certain way?" And I told them, "We don't have time. I can't explain it to you. I'd happily explain it to you afterwards." And they, this person would not resist. She almost felt a little bit offended, and it was unfortunate because we were wasting time. The customer really wanted this fast, and so I had to stop and tell her, and it wasted a lot of time. And obviously, it was a convoluted story, and obviously, it was right, it was accurate, and it was the right thing to do. So she finally put it in, and of course, it wasted a lot of time, and it's rather unfortunate, but you have to kind of parse through these situations. I got mad afterwards because, like, I definitely would not have done the same thing. I would have been respectful and just put in the order. It was a very reasonable request. Um, but a lot of these people working there, they were in their 40s, 50s, uh, you know, around that age, maybe late 30s, and so they'd been working there for decades, but they had still kind of menial jobs, small wages, and I was surprised, but a lot of times they operated not really as adults or professionals, but oftentimes in kind of simplistic human nature ways, easily offended, or they demand the respect, but you know they can get hypocritical if the roles were reversed. So that was one instance of many where stuff like this happens, and it's been many, many years since that experience, but um, it's always good to reflect and learn. Well, what could I have done differently, done better? How do you navigate these situations? And I think the biggest lessons through this is that you get plunged into a world where most people are just not. Uh, you can't expect them to act ideally or even average. Many of them may act immature, unprofessional, uh, in ridiculous ways. I remember even a lot of the head chefs and chefs in the kitchen. They were adults in terms of age, but they would act very like immature in terms of like bursting out in rage, especially when things got busy. Or they wouldn't do something, and I had been nothing but respectful to them for months, and I had a reasonable request. But just because of how they were feeling that day or whatever reason, they're like, "Well, I'm not going to do that." And definitely the environment can affect that. It can get high stress when you have more orders than you can handle. But I was surprised. I was like, man, I've already learned at my age to control my emotions to an extent, but you guys can't. Obviously, I wouldn't say that to them, but you learn, or you at least try to learn. You get exposure to dealing with difficult people or people who act in very subpar ways. And so I haven't figured it out completely, and I think that's something you should learn, because you will and I will continuously, no matter where you climb in the world, unless you find like some type of silo or vacuum where you're at some company where everyone's just perfect, you will plunge into sometimes very chaotic, unideal situations with people who don't communicate. And even, I mean, speaking of, today I ran into such an incident at a restaurant where just the customer service was not good, and the communication was very poor for many levels. One of which was because the other person could barely speak English and wasn't really listening to me or explaining it well. So hopefully that helps. I think if the action step is for you to start to reflect and learn from what you could have done better. So that's that. For this story, let me know your thoughts on it. Obviously, stay positive about it. Don't get toxic in the comments. But even to this day, I reflect: what did I do wrong? Should I have been brisk? Should I have cut her off? No, that wouldn't have stopped her. Maybe I had to slow down there. Maybe I was beating myself up for slowing down when that was the only option. And I had to explain why I needed certain things sent over to the kitchen.